So once again, good evening to all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakat. I want to thank all of you for being here to participate in this very interesting lecture that we're about to listen to. I'm deeply honored to have my dear friend and internationally renowned scholar, Dr. Hassan Radoine, to present his lecture entitled Exploring Architectural Frontiers, Contemporary Design in the Middle East. We're honored to have him here at VCU-QATAR and certainly here in Education City. The lecture explores architectural frontiers on how environments are comprehended and how contemporary design considers their contextual meanings. Dr. Hassan Radoine is an architectural curator, critic, educator, author, and is the director of the École Nationale d'Architecture in Morocco. He has worked as an expert for UNESCO, United Nations Habitat, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, and his forthcoming book by Wiley Publication is entitled Architecture in Context, subtitle Designing in the Middle East. At VCU-QATAR, we take pride in our creative endeavors as they further reach broader audiences, build partnerships and collaborations, and engage our communities and the world at large. We aim to encourage others to embrace the beauty of humanity beyond aesthetics. It is important that our deeds never occur within a vacuum, as they should be mutually dynamic, operational, beneficial at multiple levels of engagement. VCU-QATAR cultivates a dynamic environment of diverse research, learning, and community engagement that propels the holistic development of exemplary artists, designers, scholars, to build vibrant communities and diversified economies. We are here to build a community of scholars to set direction and to achieve a common purpose as defined in our mission and vision. And with that in mind, I'm happy once again to welcome Dr. Hassan Radoine.
Assalamu alaikum, Masa al khair. Let me turn this mic. Okay. Thank you, Dean Akil Kahira. I would never forget the first day I met Professor Akil in Fez. It was almost 20 years ago. I'm proud of you, and I'm happy that you've made it to be the Dean in University Commonwealth in Doha, and I think it's a well-deserved position. And last night, while you got me a package, I found your magazine. How happy I was. I saw the word context, finally. In an art school, design school, the word context is considered. Despite the fact that artists, architects, they always think that creativity is starting from nowhere, which is wrong. We're always designing for someone, somewhere. And we need to define who that one and what and where that design should be. Yet you may argue with me and you say, but art is abstraction. I fully agree that prophecy of art is very important, finding the absolute and finding resolutions in the prophecy. But yet, don't forget that you're a human, and there is certain anchorage that no one can forget, and this is from where we start. So, where I found this magazine, Context, and then I put the title for my book with Wiley International, Architecture in Context. Why I wanted to do this research that took me 6 years, and I'm delighted and happy that I stayed and I lived in the UAE for 5 years, where I was chairing the architectural engineering department at the University of Sharjah. So being from Morocco and coming to the Gulf, I was caught in between the memory, history, and the prophecy and the prospection. And this is why we need to find a middle way. So let me start. Of course, you will ask me why my presentation title is Architectural Frontiers. Is intriguing, because if you put exploring architectural frontiers, you think I may talk just about skyscrapers and the technology and high tech and how smart we go, but I will show you that the frontiers, there are other frontiers of acquiring knowledge of that context. The first thing actually that we need all of us to think about, this international standardized vocabularies that are actually all over versus a duplicated local form of architecture that creates a striking contrast in cities of the Middle East. We are so ingrained in the past. We as people of the MENA region, North Africa and the Middle East, whatever someone will tell you that I am a modernist, but be sure inside of him or her, there is something always calling the past. This is a fact. So how to deal with that? And here I have a wonderful slide, and actually a futuristic image of Doha. It was done by a visual futurist, Sid Mead of New York Times, and he's dreaming about Doha, how it would be in 2050. And how I found this photo? Because I was the technical reviewer of the project of Souq Waqif in 2012 that was nominated for the Aga Khan Award. And they sent me as a blind reviewer to go to the Souq Waqif, where I stayed for 1 week. And then I needed to defend Souq Waqif with all the critiques, that is fake, that is fabricated heritage, whatever. And they show to the jury members this photo. We are caught in between this futuristic extraterrestrial setting and in between a heritage that we can reinvent. And of course, all the time, John Novell got me, but Hassan is pastiche. But I will prove to you that the sense of being in Souq Waqif, that is actually the only open air space in the whole Doha, it's worth considering. So when you look at this form of this building, which is done by, of course, the design house, Transparent House, this is how they name themselves, and it's called the Crescent Moon Tower proposal in Dubai. It's striking how a motif or how a symbol, maybe Orientalist, because no one is, the crescent is the symbol of Islam, or the green color, it's nonsense. There is no referential about that. And you have someone in an office in New York getting that crescent and making it a whole building. I'm not against art. I'm not against aesthetic shape. But we need actually always to question these international designs. They are good, striking, technology, all what you can look for, but at the same time, we need also to be a bit critical, but constructive criticism. And I'm alarming you, please, whatever I say here, it's nothing about negative criticism, but is an academic criticism for the sake of what architectural critique, to construct something better. So here, architecture in the Middle East then is trapped between corrective measures to keep the tradition. This is why we have all this restoration, rehabilitation, conservation, and all the adaptive reuse projects all over our region, since it is a very important region with the high number of World Heritage Sites, more than 70 sites they are on the list of UNESCO. So it's a place of memory that worth conservation. But at the same time, we cannot be trapped in the past, and we need to foresee the future and project an architectural future. So there is a complexity in the region. We cannot just claim and say, okay, we understood the architectural fabric of the region, because it did not start from 2000 or 1900, but it's very rooted almost 9000 BC. This is Souq Waqif that I defended. And actually, it's very interesting to see the people. What interests me after almost 20 years of practicing, teaching architecture, researching, I got to the point that, you know what, the architectural form is only the vehicle, the shell. And we need to be very careful not to forget the human factor. If these people are enjoying Souq Waqif, then the whole physical environment is just a memorable shell that brings its own shapes and forms. Hence, I have for you these key questions. How to comprehend the background of architectural tradition in the Middle East and the North Africa. It's very important, and hence the term Turath. Very complex. How to understand it without being imprisoned in the past, but in the same time, how to reactivate this tradition and push it forward to the future. How to design architecture in the Middle East while observing contextual qualities without falling into emotional pastiche. And this is what we see. We cannot have old buildings, they look like a mosque because the arch and the dome, and then we just duplicate the arch and the dome. There are Medinas, they don't have a single arch. So there is a very diverse portfolio of architectural heritage in the whole region, and how we would understand the intrinsic value of heritage as a resilient trace that will give us triggers to integrate in the design process. How to grasp a context in order to design in a responsible way. Because if we design a responsible way, and this is why I'm teaching my students, you cannot just put a trace or a line without reflecting upon who would be behind that line, because that line would be a wall. How to explore contextual elements in an innovative way. What are the different contextual and cultural meanings to be considered in design? A room can change the life of a family. I would never forget when I was observing in Dubai, Starbucks and this beautifully dressed man, they take all the chairs and they put a circle jalsa in the middle of Starbucks. Starbucks was designed, but we do have our own of gathering. Let's make it in Starbucks. I think this is a resilient form of being together, which is equality. What design should be imported and how it would be embraced. How to reach a local anchorage without discarding the positive global input. I'm not here advocating the past, nor romanticizing tradition, but we should also be in tandem with the global change, technology, and all the evolution of building materials and all the high-tech things. So my presentation is 4 parts. The first one, it's a historical review, because all the young architects and even the foreign architects designing in the Middle East, they don't know the Middle East. They've never been in it. So they just go to the Google and they say Islamic architecture, they get a couple of musharabiyat and arches and stuff. Like one of my students worked with an international firm in Abu Dhabi. The client saw the building, he said, oh, I don't see anything Arabic or Islamic in it. So the designer got to the office, my student was the witness, and he said, go to Google, get some musharabi and paste them on the building for him to see that it's local. This is not what is local. And this is not what is a responsible designer should do. There is elements beyond, and we need to grasp this past. Of course, not like a historian, but at least to understand its elements. 2, architectural vocabularies and styles. What are those vocabularies? No one has studied them. I will show you the shocking thing of using the arch, for instance, and how the arch was twisted, tortured, all in different ways without respecting even the rules of an arch that has its own majesty and aesthetics. And the third part is the cultural and contextual meanings. No single form in architecture, wall or a window or an opening or a door does not have a signification, does not have a mental construct among local people, the way they perceive that space or that physical boundary. The fourth part is the trends and discourses. What are now these trends and discourses? I don't want to be long. I understand you will be annoyed by the term Middle East and why I'm using the term Middle East, because of course, I had a long discussion with editors, peer reviewers about why I was using before Islamic and then Arabic, and say, okay, the Middle East, I know it's a very contemporary concept and term, but actually it's clear now, it covers the whole MENA region, North Africa and Middle East, and it stretches from Morocco to Afghanistan. But in this lecture, I will be focusing more on the North Africa, the Arab region, Turkey, Iran, just to be sure that we are situating the ground. So the maps here, I've just selected a couple of maps of this Middle East. It's the most strategic location in the planet according to Ibn Khaldun. In his Muqaddimah, he described this belt, Hizam. It's the most strategic place to live, survive, persist, endure. And this is why most important religions, most important traditions, customs, they were actually shaped in this very important Mediterranean belt. And of course, you could see here the different deserts. So we have the Sahara Desert in Morocco, Algeria, Libyan Desert, we have the Sinai Desert, the Arabian Desert, and you could see that wide, Saharan kind of land with the rich mountains that you see on the map, on the map here. And you could see the Atlas Mountains here and different chains of mountains. No one considers this environmental potential in the whole region. When you see the mountains, it's a reservoir of water that flows all over and creates beautiful rivers. And Iraq is one example, Iran, Euphrates, and other ones, of course, Malwiya in Morocco, and how this transition between the Saharan land and the mountains create the most important plateaus, the plateaux that are very important for settlements and human settlements. Hence, the richness of this region that started from the culture of nomads. And of course, when I lived in the UAE, of course in Morocco, we do have also our desert. And when myself lived for a while as a researcher to experience, to understand, I was very amazed how emptiness that we think, we foreigners, we go there and we see there is nothing, which is absolutely wrong. There is a beautiful book of Gustave Le Bon, Civilisation des Arabes, Civilization of Arabs, and where he was actually depicting and describing how important is the material culture for a nomad more than anyone who has already wealth. So when you're moving, you need to carry the minimum, but that minimum should be very precious. So we are valuing the material culture. But in the same time, there is the human quality itself. This is why poetry, share, quality of the human being, courage, and all this stuff that is intangible, which actually represents the resilience of those people that is transposed in an urban setting, and the encounter between this resilience of the nomads and, of course, the material culture that will come afterwards with the spread of Islam will make amazing wonders. I give you here one example in Yemen. This is the Sulaidis, actually in a village of Al-Hajjara, 2,300 meters high altitude, 12th century settlement. Look how tough and harsh the environment of the mountains, yet they settled and they created a settlement. And this actually what is an architectural making that respect the context, but also challenges the context to create its own architecture. It's not an architecture that is made out of nowhere and then you put it. And then of course, if we move quickly, I don't want to do the history here, the geopolitical and environmental characteristics of this actually, of this region, from climate to the history of urban, of course, and architectural savoir-faire, and all these elements, they shaped indeed the different settlements. In the right, on the left, I'm sorry, the Akkadians, we have the Babylon city, 3000 BC. On the middle, we have the city of Ur in Iraq, which is 4000 BC. And of course, Jericho, 9600 BC in West Bank of Jordan. So this portfolio of architectural fabrics, they are denied. Because when you go to any school of architecture, when they teach you the history, theory, and criticism of architecture, they start by Vitruvius. And then no Sumerians, no Akkadians, no Egyptians, no pyramids. The whole thing starts with the classical era. This is not me saying that, but my American professors, scholars who are actually authorities in the history, theory, and criticism, who are criticizing the way we view this portfolio of architectural making. Now, it comes now when Islam came and embraced all these civilizations. It's not like what happened in Spain when Charles V came, or another king came to Cordoba. Before he came to Cordoba, when they conquered Cordoba and they took it, the generals, they tried to take or erase all the Islamic traces, and they put Christian symbols and iconography. And then when the king came, I have a beautiful quotation, and he criticized the generals of the army, what you've done is wrong. That beauty has its roots and should remain like that. So in Islamic culture or Arabic culture, never any aesthetic elements of other cultures were denied. There are elements, thawabits, and there are mutaghayyirat, there are constant values, they don't change, but all the physicalities, they may change according to those principles, but no icon symbol is eternal. And this is why here you have the beautiful courtyard of the Madrasa Bu'naniya, 14th century in Morocco, and look at this beautiful order within a disorder according to Orientalists. But I have a paper if you want to read it. I named it Planning Paradigm in the Medina, Order in Randomness, because I'm saying there is nothing called randomness or disorder. If we look at Lévi-Strauss, when he left France and went to the Amazon to study the indigenous tribes, he was looking for this mythical, ethical value that is shaping a whole community. So there is no one primitive and the other one is developed. So it just question, like Alan Cole Cohen's, he was saying, just question of adaptation to tools. So this actually leads me to this, how we would perceive these architectural antecedents. And my critique is not only to foreigners, but also to locals, local scholars, who got caught in romanticizing Islamic architecture and essentializing it in a set of forms rather than looking at the whole vista, whole portfolio of vast array of forms. Now, actually, this is a very important how this antecedent now would be interpreted, and this interpretation, use of classical antecedents in the Islamic Arabic world started after independence, after of course, colonization, the whole North Africa, etc. And after independence, like in Morocco, we had a trend after independence called la Maroccanisation de l'architecture, Moroccanization of architecture. It was just a romanticized Medina, you know, with no soul. Or the symbol of the whole Iran that was actually designed by Hussein Amanat. It's called Azadi Tower, that was actually erected in 1970 as an expression of nationalism through this architecture and urban planning. This is another story, how architecture is always used to reveal power, ideology, etc., etc. Now, till we came to the crisis, we imported a model, and then the model was elitist, like downtowns, and we left the people. Like in Morocco, now, since independence, the whole North Africa, including Turkey, even Iran, and of course Iraq, Syria, the social housing in the whole Middle East is problematic. And the result, you have this quantitative method of resolving housing through an architecture of quantity that lacks any sense of human well-being. And of course, we're caught also, I'm sorry to go back just one point here. The problem with this actually social housing that has changed radically the cityscapes of all cities in North Africa and Middle East. Of course, excluding the Gulf cities, we will choose another model that I will actually describe to you. Now, moving through these transitions, how we would actually distill these vocabularies of an architecture? We are busy with a huge or a heavy portfolio of antecedents. We are also caught by colonialization and the colonialism and the worry to be independent and create our modern states. And these modern states, they needed to have a special architecture to say we are here. And then, of course, the social issues and how to dwell the poor. And where is architectural design here? This is why it's important. Please, these are just kind of drawing that shows when I was in the Emirates, of course, I was always thinking about this human scale Medina, can be any Medina, and then all these buildings that they come. I'm not against these fashioned buildings. They are good as pieces in themselves. But when you put them and there is now urban setting, where is the community? I am happy that Dubai, after setting the metro, they created a department in the municipality called Community Development Unit. Why? They realized that not the buildings that they make the city, but actually the community that creates the place. And they are doing now a lot of projects and of course a lot of efforts to try to remedy this issue of human environments and within the buildings. Henceforth, where is the architect? The architect is here. The modern architect now, in any school, but I studied in Morocco, studied in UK, United States. Trust me, I went all kind of architecture schools in France, l'école La Pyramide. And then what they do, they have all of them concept. In French, they say le parti architectural. That means a genius will bring concept, stylize the concept, and then make the building. And then, of course, what we focus on, sun orientation. You see all the architects, the first thing they put is the sun, and they put the limits of the site, and then the concept, and then the building. And the whole spectrum is missed. Of course, what the architect is dealing with now is just the physical layer, whereas the cultural layer, the social and communal layer, the biological layer, the environmental layer. If we consider the depth of the whole region, including the Gulf, and they wrote an amazing paper called Cultural Resilience in Contemporary Urbanism in Sharjah. I was actually amazed when I got the plane to come to the Gulf, like I was like an Orientalist. I came and I had the stereotype in my brain, there is nothing, just the Sahara Desert and camels. But I was shocked. If I look at the Bastakia, I look at the, Souq Waqif, and there were settlements, there were towns, there were trade, there was transit. It's just this question of this new trend of totally new architecture that actually lead us not to look at this all elements around. Now, if we start deciphering those elements, and how actually any designer or architect, if he respects or she respects those layers, may get to that. You may ask me, this is a complex exercise, sir. We need to be PhDs to do that. I'll tell you, if you are a smart designer, sensitive, and there are so many, like the one who designed the Islamic Art Museum in Doha, a building that I like so much. He spent time in the Fatimid Cairo, sketching, assimilating, comprehending a whole vocabulary before projecting a new project in Doha, and they think he succeeded indeed. The first thing that we need to consider site typologies, but when I say site typologies, is not about the physical part of the site, but the biological layer, cultural layer, the physical layer, the social and communal layer, and the environmental layer. If we don't respect these layers and all these dimensions in a locality, that means the architect or a designer is missing the whole point. And of course, comes the second point, the massing and volumetric composition. I am not against here skyscrapers, just for information, because tall buildings is not something new. Since Chicago School or since Le Corbusier in Ville Radieuse, there were architects who were always dreaming to build vertically. You know why? It's not because of an aesthetic thing, but because of optimizing the use of land. The massing and volumetric composition, it's so important. It's not about just a design per se, but actually finding the right proportions for use and finding a balance between use and aesthetic level. And of course, it is implied sometimes the volumetric play, it is implied rather than overt. And architectural forms, they should be always associated with the human use. I don't want to discuss this whole debate about who is first, is it function or form? This is now obsolete debate. What is first, is it function or form and the function? It's an egg and chicken discussion. Why? Because this modernist discussion has led us to some issues of contrast between perceived space and conceived space. Conceived space is the one that is conceived by the architect, the designer, and the perceived one is the one perceived by the user. And there is actually a clash between the two. Why I'm making this drawing? Is the architect understanding this couple in this region beside the outside form? What about apartments? Do you know how we change our apartment? I bet you that any couple or any family in the Middle East, even the architect is local. As soon as you get the apartment, you start changing the whole thing because it's not fitting your style, your custom. I'm going to mention some very important, after reviewing, researching about this question of space in the modernist, discourse. Always Miss Van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, excuse me, it's another context. You can't import Miss Van der Rohe free plan to a place where there are lots of elements that should be respected. privacy, privacy, privacy is a primordial value for someone from here. So you are giving me a free plan that has wonderful vistas and views and an amazing simple box that give you pure aesthetic elements, but inside cannot be adapted to my own use. And then have here quite an important kind of transition of how the buildings they started. We were living in courtyard houses, and of course the scale of the human could see the scale. And then, of course, during the colonial period, we imported the facade, but we kept the courtyard, and the scale, of course, is becoming, human being becoming smaller, till we get to this. And then this international style, what is called international style. And we put this court, you know why? Just because there is another one that should be do one like that and the other one, and four of them to create a little space not to see each other, peeping Tom. But this is how it's working, and they will come to show you when this building will become a crescent and will become a banana, will become all kinds of forms. So here, the question of scale and proportion is very important. The problem is not skyscraper or tall building, but do we ask designers to adapt the tall building to our requirements? And trust me now, there are attempts internationally to create amazing international vertical communities. We call them vertical communities. Yes, indeed, we can. And we can, through design, creative engine of design, create amazing, vibrant spaces and project even a new culture. But the scale and proportion between the cityscape before, between the new that is aspiring for an international image, and you have this dichotomy of local versus international. But I think now is becoming common, we are used to it. However, how we need to go, despite the high aesthetic value, the current out-of-scale architecture is devoid of any human sense. And we need to find one. It's not about how high, it can be high, no problem. We can have a wonderful experience with someone sitting with us in the plane, as I had in my coming here. I did not even feel time. And I don't know how high we were in the sky, in the middle of nowhere. So creating an experience is very important. So therefore, designers, they are the ones who are enriching the experience of a cultural experience, and they are the ones who are expunging it. You have experience, and sometimes you go to a space and you find, I don't feel good in this space. You're right, because there are no elements that would actually get you, like the light and form. And if actually we value light, look how our craftsmen, master builders, they did with light, not only in the Islamic world, but also in the Christian world, even in India, Buddhist temples. Light was always important for all, so therefore light was used as energy. Light was used as a space. Sometimes we may define even a place, and they will come to define what is place and space. And lights can define form, like this dome of the main royal theater in Marrakesh. It's the first time I got under the dome. I don't see the dome, but I see these sources that are small openings trickling light inside. And of course, this is a contemporary use here. This is in Crescent in Saudi Arabia, the new university campus. It's amazing. There is no issue of using new materials, but actually creating an experience. And of course, light as metaphor. And this light as metaphor is what we see in Muqarnasat, for instance. And how light is transmitting the message of what is that architecture, and creating even sometimes images, they are not there, but you need to make a whole metaphor to grasp the content of that place. Order and geometry. I mean, of course, geometry is a problem, though actually in our culture, in most Islamic and Arabic heritage, geometry, the Medina can look like random, okay, disordered. But my question, why the courtyard is always a square or rectangle? The person who made that beautiful courtyard can make that square the shape of the whole city, like Al-Mansur in Baghdad. He wanted to make his city as a circle. He put all the people outside, he put his palace and the souk inside, and he said in Tarikh Tabari, he said, I am now happy because they are uncomfortable, because they are worried about their kids outside the walls in the day, and during the night they worry about their merchandise in the souk inside. This is just a story. But look at this fountain on the right. How the human use is also a geometrical order that we always forget. Making ablution before getting to prayer in one of the madrasas in Fez. And of course, these elements of geometry, they always come to what? To add an ornament or a symbol. This is a contemporary project done just less than 5 years by a local architect in Morocco. This is the gate of the train station in Marrakesh. And they are celebrating 50 years of launching the train and railway in Morocco. And of course, this is another way of using the geometry as ornament, and this time as a digital ornament. How can the computer can generate a whole scheme, and this scheme is actually using local patterns, and which is not bad. However, my argument here, when you look at this Yemeni facade and this Tunisian facade, clearly they are both from the same region, but there are local richness. Look how the Tunisian developed his facade or her facade, and then the Yemenis, how they did the same, but more levels, and they created a whole richness. But when you look at them, beside the discussion, ornament is a crime, like Luce and the whole literature where modernists, they want to get rid of the past because, you know, the neoclassicism and the ornament, they were used only by the rich and the kings, and then the people, they wanted to free architecture from these aesthetic symbols. They are only symbol of wealth. However, in the Islamic world or the Middle East, is not about only wealth, but also about a whole community vocabulary. Like in Sahara, Timbuktu, when all the members of the community, they get together to coat and again cover the walls again with earth coat, and then they put their motifs, their ladies and men, they are getting together. It is a cultural expression, and it's not a crime to have an ornament. However, we need to be very, very careful. The use of arch, the true aesthetic arch with taqasim, divisions. قوس الخماسي, السباعي, ثلاثي. So there are actually very strict rules to draw an arch. And the beauty of the arch actually comes from these divisions. They are very linked to a technical constraint of, you know, making it out of brick or stone, etc. And look, because thanks to the concrete, any architect can do an arch now. He doesn't have all these complications. But look how ugly those arches are becoming. And all the arches I'm showing you here, they are not fiction, but real buildings for you to see how the majestic arches, they are becoming ugly motifs, and they have no soul. Now, to be not only on the aesthetic level and the question of form and how we make a design contextual with actually a sense of belonging to that place, we need to think about what is the cultural and contextual meaning of these forms, hence the complexity. Therefore, design schools, they need to cultivate a sense of locality. And this is why I congratulate VCU and for establishing an art and design school in Doha. Yes, it is needed. We cannot just import, art cannot be imported. Dhawq is individual. So how to explore things inside, acquire, and this is why I'm using two concepts here, adaptation and adoption. First thing, we adopt a foreign element, but we need to work on it to adopt it, to become ours. And this is the richness. And of course, this close understanding of how to acquire the skill to understand the meaning behind any form, motif, pattern, etc. It brings me to the first element, which is essential, which is the cultural value judgment and symbolic codes. Actually, attachment, the sky or to the water. This is why we have fountains. People, they just copy fountains. We have some ugly fountains in Marrakesh. They put them, they do them, and they do wheels, and you know they have electric plug. I say, wow, that's a dead fountain. Why? Because the fountain was not done for the sake of a fountain, but was done to celebrate the element of water. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. Is the water that is celebrated as khalq, as something, a source of tadabbur, and the fountain with all its decor comes only to celebrate that. The same with light in the courtyard. We call it in Morocco al-halqa, the ring, and how the ring is well decorated because actually you look at the cosmos through that frame almost like a painting. And this actually this cultural value judgment will lose that connection with that sense of judgment. I was using before taste, but one colleague, he told me, Hassan, I think it's more a sense of judgment. And some people, they are endowed and they are clever that they can understand this vocabulary. It's very important. This is why we are now caught by so many forms, and then we lost these elements, and then we come to this. When the representation or the expression of cultural meaning, what you see in Ibn Battuta Mall on the right, and you see the elephant, I'm not against Ibn Battuta, I like it. Of course, it was actually an idea to be inspired from Ibn Battuta travel and make the theme in a mall to attract you to come to buy. It's a business portfolio thing. I'm not against that. However, when Ibn Battuta will get out and be in every house, like the Ibn Battuta Mall, that's a problem. In the left side, you have the street, a beautiful slopey stair that gets to a door, and look how the community, they made their own cultural expression. Versus, of course, this is a clock. Clock on the elephant is another story. Yet, of course, before I came here, I debated this subject of Gulf cities and Gulf architectures a lot. When I came first to Dubai, I was very critical. But now, no. I said Dubai made its own project and succeeded. You can't deny that the model succeeded in terms of business, international image, and all the elements. But could we duplicate that model? And what measures you need to do not to copy it verbatim? I give you one example here. Look at this. I don't have the video of Libeskind, but when I saw this building, and I saw the clip of Libeskind trying to explain to us this building in Dubai. And it's striking how when in the video, he said, now I'm touching the sun. Please check the video. when he's talking about this building and see the discourse and you see the design and you get so shocked. I'm here touching the moon, I'm touching the dunes of the Sahara, something like that, and I am trying to link between the two through this crescent. And you know, the ugly thing we as architects and engineers, and you put a stick to hold it, which is from engineering point of view, it's a failure. And if you ask any civil engineer, said, what this musibah is, catastrophe. If you can hold it, like the first one I showed you, crescent moon, at least it's holding itself, at least. But you know, to have this, connecting the ground to the sky, wave to the future, these are his words. And then the outcome is this, versus this. Of course, this may be a 17th century house, Burajandi house, but look how clever the whole climatic things, the sirdab and the malaqif that you have here, al-barjil, and even in the when I was I visited some old settlements here in Qatar when I was doing the review for Suq Waqif, and of course I was really amazed how, for instance, something that we don't have in Morocco, it called Haqq al-Hawa. The judges, they were, if you want to do your malqaf or your barjil, you should orient it different from others, and then how even you capture every single cool air in order to refresh your inside of your house. These are kind of solutions for technical problems that they made aesthetic elements have a value, not just for the sake of an aesthetic element. So therefore, spatial cultural arrangements are used. Actually, one linguist, he used the strategy of configuration. I think if we want to design for a Khaliji or for a North African or Maghrebi, or we need always to ask those users what is the strategy of spatial configuration before even embarking upon any spatial partition. And this work is not done. The homework is not done. And therefore, we just hurry to get a crescent touching the moon rather than thinking about people, their needs, their requirements, the lights during the day. When I get to an office without a single window, I say, oh, mamma mia. That's a problem. Imagine you are with electric. I'm sorry for the ones having offices without windows. You know why? Because you're living here, somewhere. Because, you know, in order to make it thick, because it needs to be thick to get to that shape, somewhere should be inside of this croissant. So, now, how to consider now this climate and environment, adaptive and creative sustainability. And always I'm thinking about Masdar city. I was sending my student there. I went there. I tried to do a lot of research on Masdar. But at the end, of course, not me, even Masdar managers, now they got rid of this question of zero carbon because it's impossible to have anything zero carbon. The problem of Masdar, you need to buy sustainability. That's a problem. If you think you are spending money to get sustainability, so it's not sustainability. Or you need to have a PhD to use this sustainable city, because all the electric cars and how to move, how to, you know. Or I think sustainability should be affordable, sustainability is developing the know-how, and I use the word techni that Heidegger used as a Greek term. Technology is the tools produced by science for mass production. So it's all about gadgets, and we get to consumerism. Technically, we need to develop an institute knowledge, know-how of certain tools and how they would adapt to that context. And with time, the tool will become a culture. And this is the problem. I'm not saying no for importing. I cannot come to Doha without getting to this Boeing 737. I can make it, but however, how to adapt and adopt. And of course, this building know-how, I spoke about it. and morality, ethics, and responsibility is most important among architects and designers. If we design for people, please don't fancy with your ego to find something just out there and then you ask me to appreciate it. Yes, it could be applied in art, and here I get to Coomaraswamy's discussion, amazing discussion. I advise any artist to read Coomaraswamy and how he deciphered the artifact of the museum, who is actually the viewer and who is, what is exposed and who is the viewer. And we can find a compromise, we can find a negotiation, because even when you are designing or painting, you have in your brain the audience. Don't tell me that you don't have anyone in your brain. No, because you are a product of humanity. Yes or no? Yes, you are. So we need actually to, I'm not saying handcuffed and try to reproduce arches and domes and make every building look like a mosque. No, I stopped, I've never advocated that, because architecture in the region has a lot of rich antecedent. If reactivated as triggers of innovation, they can bring us amazing forms. Last, very short, what are now the discourses? To be honest with you, in the whole region, Islamic Arabic region, name it, or say North Africa, Middle East, among architects, we lost any discourse. We lost schools of thought since Hassan Fathi, rahimahullah, Rifat al-Jadarji, my friend Rasim Badran, and of course, the one who designed al-Bayati. These people, they tried, or Makiya, Salih Makiya, they tried, but they were just after independence. Important to think about this different discourse and what would be done. I'm not here advocating just an earth architecture or just an arch or a dome, but I'm saying how to explore everything. So therefore, the first trend, I think this question of regionalism. The ones who are not in architectural critique, especially Frank Frampton from Harvard, when he devised the term critical regionalism, because sometimes when you are applying regional forms, you apply them emotionally, and that's the problem. Like the postmodernist forms, when they just copied forms and then they look really like pastiche-like. So now the problem of regionalism, I'm saying we can have a constructive regionalism. Regionalism is not something not to do, but how to understand the regional idioms and regional vocabularies. And here you have, in Tangier, you have this tobacco building. And by the way, this is like the building that is kept alone. Where is the urban fabric of this building versus this international kind of style of building that was built just 2 years ago? This one, and you see it. I'm not saying, no, don't do this because this one is here. So now, what is the balance between this internationalism and this regionalism? Could we find a balance? Could we find the bridge? We can if we use the creative mode. The other thing, of course, the other trend is I call it the paradoxical design. Fertilizing, I know the Anglo-Saxon audience, you don't have this verb in English. This is Frenchy, fertiliser. But in English, actually, reactivating. Fertilizing, I know, but activating or mimicking Islamic Arabic architecture. There is no problem of getting inspired from a motif or a pattern, but the issue, how would be applied in contemporary design, and you need to understand the whole portfolio of forms in order to understand how you would reactivate that element within a new composition. And there were architects who tried. Of course, this is Mohammed Makiya, a grand mosque of Kuwait that was built in 1984. And The striking thing, Makia was trying to be employing the engineering solution, and look how strict he was in terms of structural elements, and then of course the dome and the minarets, because it's a mosque, and look at the geometry here. But Makia was like the Calatrava of that time, was like not accepting the aesthetic play of forms without stemming out of a structure. And here the difference between decor and ornament. Decor, it's just an added decoration as a maquillage. But ornament, when the structural element creates the decor and becomes an intrinsic element within the composition of the structure or the building, hence the beauty of architectural design when it is well done from in within to outside and outside in. Outside in, outside. And of course, and I remember a beautiful discussion with Rasim Badran when he won the Aga Khan Award for a mosque in Iraq. And he said, you know why I won? Because I did not duplicate Islamic forms, but I was sculpturing the body of the mosque to deduce elements of ornaments, and all the arches and the elements that I applied, they are actually the result of that building. The next one is very interesting. It's another trend of Hassan Fathi rahimahullah, designing with nature. I think what is striking about Hassan Fathi, of course, critics, they are saying he failed in Al Gurna village and other ones, and even he built for Al Fallahin, and he applied their techniques, and at the end they left him. They didn't want to live in the village. But I think Hassan Fathi, it was an interesting transition between a period of cement enterprises and pushing foreign materials, and between someone who wants to make an architecture which is affordable. I like his book. I think the translation of the title is wrong in English. In French, it's construire avec le peuple, constructing with people, building with people. But in the English version, they put the architecture of the poor, which is wrong. It's building with people. In French, construire avec le peuple. And this is what he tried to do. And they think this is the first sustainability scenario. If you want to make sustainable buildings, sustainable projects, sustainable design, you need to be bottom up. Listen to the voices of people, and then of course try to embrace it, transcend to the level of creative sense in order to interpret that. Now we get to this. Post-Orientalists, I call them post-Orientalists, nationalists, fantasists, design, name them. Of course, when I see a building like that, here I think, I don't know, please understand me. If you're using this design for a piece of furniture, teapot, for anything that can be, fashionable, there is no issue with it. But when it comes to architecture, it's a problem. It's a problem. Why? Because fantasy design have no rules and are more about dramatizing and imagining exotic forms in order to create an architecture of power and bewilderment to intimidate local communities, or amusement and exotic adventurism to please tourists. Young architects should be aware of this unrealistic trend that harms the continuity of genuine architectural cultures. And the theme park mega project, of course, I mean, Dubai always comes to the brain because I lived in UAE. It's normal that I'm using the elements all over the region. And they think that here we want to be like the Jumeirah. And of course, we want to have something local, but in the same time, we need to have something international. The issue now, how we would combine the two, but always thinking about the built environment. What is in between? It's not the problem of the theme parks. You may have a theme park, but it's always a gated community. You need to close the gates because it's one package. One package, the other package, But where is the city? So therefore, theme parks, they were created to be in the vicinity of the city. Like the malls, when they started first, they were outside the city. Now the mall becomes the center. There is no issue with that. When I lived in the UAE, it's hot. I cannot dream shopping in under 46 degrees and it's extremely humid. I really enjoyed the city center. I was going there, cinema, getting coffee in a very comfortable environment. And did you notice that these malls are actually advancing in terms of how they are designed to bring the community in and create an experience? They are not anymore like just boutiques, which is good. Ibn Battuta is an attempt, but it's a cultural interpretation. Now, the last trend that I'm here, I can say it, advocating it, even with my students, sustainability-based design. For all architects in the region and all the international architects who have a morale and ethics, when we come to the region, we need to think about this sustainability-based design. There is another term, design by inquiry. Design by inquiry is not like you fix a concept and you sell me one concept. No, I need to investigate, inquire the process, and the design is developed with the client, with the consumer, with the user, and then the end result is all about persistence, endurance, sustainability, communal experience, sense of belonging, identity, all those elements. Don't get to a polemical discussion that identity is not there. No, identity, no one can deny it anywhere in the planet, because you cannot be someone unless you belong to somewhere. And that somewhere that gives you that sense of memory and sense of belonging, and this is how we are different to exchange these experiences. My conclusion, and I'm sorry to be long, the Middle East has been, let me read with you, it's very small here, I don't have my glasses. The Middle East has been a battleground between the local and imported ideologies of both local and foreign architects. This has harmed the normal understanding of the act of designing as a genuine endeavor that ought to be geared towards producing an architecture of democracy and well-being for people. This resulted in a serious crisis of lack of any serious school of thoughts or established constructive critique regarding the architectural culture in the region. Local architects have been either fully driven by Western modernism or resorting to its counterpart, an emotional regionalism. Accordingly, if no attempt is made to refer to a certain conceptual referential and preferential on how to view and practice context in designing, the future generations of architects may lose the link with their local building know-how and community-based design forever. Architecture was and still, as discussed, among the key vehicles of memory and belonging that translates communal, spiritual, and environmental elements into a living material and visual culture. And please, before I end, of course, this is not selling process or showing the book for you to know. This is 6 years of research. A presentation is always difficult. I was always thinking about some professors, they said, no, I don't want to present a research that I did for 6 years. Now, I tell you, it's very hard to present in 40 minutes what you've done in terms of research. The ones that want to know more about it, this is my coming book, is Architecture in Context, Design in Middle East. We show up in April, inshallah, and it's with Wiley International. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm open for your questions. Thank you.